heard the theme of this month's storytelling. So I said, Jessica, I've got to do this. I got a good one for you. I've got one son, 2 daughters and 1 son. So it was about 3 years ago, one of the other daddies and another daddy said, hey, why don't we take our boys camping? They were about 15 years old at the time. I said, hey, that's a great idea. So we decided to go to Westmoreland State Park. It's a beautiful state park in Virginia, just beautiful if you haven't had a chance to go there. So we loaded up my Suburban. So what I said is, I got this gas guzzler. I got a big Suburban. I'll agree to drive and take all the stuff if y'all will do all the cooking and bring the tents and all that. So they were sold on that. So we got in my Suburban and we drove toward Montrose, Virginia. Remember, I live in Williamsburg. And Montrose is not a metropolis. It's about 400 people. So it's a small place, but it's a very historical place. Don't know if you know this, but George Washington and Robert E. Lee's birthplace is there close by in Montrose. So a beautiful place. So we got to Westmoreland State Park. We found ourselves a campsite. It was a nice campsite. It had pea gravel on it. So we got out there and we pitched our tents. And this was early in the day. Said, why don't we go into town and get ourselves a bite to eat? So that's what we did. And when you go into Montrose, you got to understand, there's 400 people. They had a food line, so that's a pretty big deal. They had a dairy freeze, pretty big deal, and they had an Angelos place. It was Italian, I think. So we decided that we were going to eat at Angelos, okay, because the lady at the state park said Angelos has good stuff. So for lunch, we went to Angelos and we all kind of looked at the menu and we said, okay, you could get a sub sandwich, you could get pizza, chicken, shrimp. And they had this plate of stuff with gravy on it that looked really good too. I couldn't tell what it was. But anyway, the little waitress there, she was cute as she could be. She said, get the steak and cheese sandwich because it is spectacular. She did this little swishy thing with her hand. And I mean, this is 6 guys, 3 boys, 3 daddies. We all got the steak and cheese sub because when a cute girl says it's spectacular, we're going to get that. So it was a great time. We did that. We went back. We went back to the campsite, and on the way, you know, we got out, the boys went swimming, we saw bald eagles, and honest to goodness, if you go to Westmoreland, you will see bald eagles. We went down to the beach. Just a wonderful time. So while we were out, we went to the food line, and we got hamburgers, hot dogs, and some other stuff. So we settled in for the night, and I kind of sat back and watched. Now, these other 2 daddies, I got to tell you about them. One of them's a colonel. Now, some of you have heard my stories before. This is not the colonel who took me to the emergency room when I overdosed on licorice. This is a different colonel. And the other fella is a headhunter. You know, I mean, he finds people jobs. Okay, that's what I mean. All right, so these 2 guys is working on the cooking. We had the hot dogs, we had the hamburgers, and the colonel, who's a Boy Scout leader too, he had one of these Dutch ovens. I didn't say anything about it. I'm kind of a cast iron snob. I know this stuff much better than these fellas did. I just kind of sat back and watched them, okay, because I didn't want to hurt their feelings. So he had read in Boy Scouts or Boys Life or some kind of magazine where you could pour blueberry pie filling into the Dutch oven and some white cake mix and some Sprite in there, and then you heat it up. And I mean, it looked good. He had a good idea there. And what I did, since I'm a mathematician, you're not going to believe this, but I'm a NASA mathematician. I counted the number of lumps of coal on the top because you want it to be even on the top and the bottom, the heat. I know cast iron. So we did that. We ate the hamburgers. We ate the hot dogs. There was so much of that blueberry stuff, we couldn't eat it all. everything was great. So the boys, they were worn out from swimming and chasing stuff, so they went to bed. And the colonel and the headhunter and I went into our tent, and they put their sleeping bags down. They said, this pea gravel's kind of hard. The colonel said, you know, I thought about bringing an air mattress. And the headhunter said, you know, I did too. And I kept my mouth shut. They said, you brought an air mattress, didn't you? And I said, yeah, I did. So, I mean, my air mattress was one of these nice ones. It had D-cell batteries in it. You just flip that thing in and whoo! All right, so it was good. And I felt bad because it took up a lot of room in the tent. I mean, it really did. So I kind of pushed it over to the side of the tent so that I didn't want to take up all the room and have a good sleep too. But, all right, so it was time to go to bed, but I didn't want to be the first one to go to bed because I was afraid that I was going to snore like a freight train, because I snore like a freight train. I mean, what? So anyway, I was lying there. The headhunter, he went to sleep, started snoring. The colonel, he went to sleep. I said, okay, this is great. Everybody's gone to sleep. About that time, I heard this tearing sound. It was a tearing sound. And I knew that right up there, kind of up and to my right, we had hung the trash on a hook. You know, you hang the trash on the hook so the bears won't get it. There was tearing. I mean, this trash was being torn. I said, oh God, what is that? It had to be a bear. Well, I sat there a little while longer, and then since I was so close up against the side of the tent, I felt this thing coming across me. And it was like, this wasn't something small, this was something big. And I said, gosh almighty, this is pretty bad. And then that thing commenced to tearing and tearing again. About that time, the colonel popped up and said, something's in the trash. I will not say what I said, but my daddy was in the United States Navy, and I used some of his words. Okay? So we kind of looked out the window, and all we could see was a furry hand. It was like, good grief, what are we going to do? Well, this guy has had 3 tours of duty in combat zones. I didn't give him some sort of patent speech. What I did do was say, you know, I ain't got any shoes on. Why don't you go out there and see if you can scare that bear? He went out. The bear was not out there. He took the trash and he took it to the dumpster. Well, we came back, and about that time we heard something else walking around in that pea gravel. Goodness gracious, that bear has come back, and he's going to be mad because you've taken away that nighttime buffet. Well, what we did here was that cast iron Dutch oven, the lid to that thing opened up. I kid you not. It opened up. You could hear it clinging back and forth. He was back for that blueberry stuff, you know, the blueberry stuff with white cake mix and the Sprite in it. Good grief almighty. We looked out the window, and it was not a bear, but it was a raccoon about the size of a 12-year-old boy. I'd say he is probably about, I don't know, 3 feet tall, 4 feet tall, 80 pounds. I might be exaggerating just a little bit, but that was a big raccoon standing on this concrete picnic table. Well, my colonel buddy and I, we're both from the South. I'm from Alabama. He's from Mississippi. I grew up on Jerry Clower. Most of you folks don't know who Jerry Clower is. He's one of the greatest storytellers of all time, and he always told about coon hunting. And poor old Marcel Ledbetter getting up in that tree and finding out it wasn't a coon and saying, "Ooh, shoot this thing!" But you would have to know Jerry Clower to know that. It was a wonderful camping trip with daddies and sons and a doggone big raccoon that we did not go back out there to try to fight or do anything else with. Y'all have a good evening.